I want to thank you and Janice McNorgan both for inviting me to present today at the Canadian Medical Hall of Fame Health Sciences online. Welcome to everybody that's online attending today from all your various locations. It's truly my privilege to get to talk to you today and share with you a little bit about my adventure and journey to how I get here and the things about what I've done that are helping guide me in my decisions as I carry on, because at each stage in my career, there's always been a choice, or there's been many choices on which way to take my career, and making sure that I align those choices with my values is what I'm going to talk about a little bit today. I'll share my screen so that you can see my presentation, and I'm going to start my timer so that I have some indication of not going too long. Just bear with me a second. There we go. Hopefully you can all see my screen there. This is not a picture that I took. I could not find my old computer from the pictures I took when I lived in the Arctic, so I took one off of Google. My presentation today is called Working on Purpose, both for why we work and how we can work on our purpose. So thanks again, Lisa and Janice, for the invitation to speak today. I'm going to start by just recognizing that we all have a different relationship with this land. And even when I look at this picture, it reminds me of the crops that my dad used to plant and we would harvest. And I have a deeply kind of emotional, personal response to the picture. Even though my family's only been on this continent for a couple of generations, I was mentioning to Lisa before this started that my family moved to Canada after the Second World War. And we are all signing in from all across Western Canada in the treaty regions of 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And then there's some 11 up in the far northwest if you're from there. And then all the unceded territories to the west of that. Now, recognizing that there's also folks on this land that have a much deeper relationship that's gone on for many centuries before my own relationship, and how meaningful that would be for them. A couple questions that I want you to take a few seconds just to think about, or a minute to dwell on before we get into the rest of the presentation. Think about why we do what we do. Because there's plenty of mornings where I wake up and I think, why am I doing what I'm doing? And what's motivating me to make the choices that I'm doing? And how does what I do today, or what I'm planning to do over the next weeks, how does that create purpose in my life and give me a sense of satisfaction? And it's no less important at my middle career stage as it is at your stage in your careers. I feel like everybody present today is continually faced with choices. So that choice, and if I flip back back a slide, when we understand why we make the choices, sometimes those choices become easier. So what I'm hoping to achieve today in the next 25 minutes or so is that you would relate to my story somewhat. Many of you being from rural, I understand that the invite to attend today's session went out to a lot of rural and smaller communities. There may be some of you present today that are from larger cities, but my impression is that many of you are from smaller communities, and that might give you a chance to relate to me. And so as you listen to my kind of story and the way that I've found my journey across the country, you can relate to that. So my story starts in Lacombe, Alberta. As Lisa mentioned, I'm calling in from Edmonton today. It's snowing right here. It snowed 10 centimeters last night. But I grew up and was born in Lacombe, Alberta. This is a picture of me in high school, and my dad sitting on the pail beside me. My older sister Julia on the left of the picture, and one of my younger brothers, Wayne, on the back of the truck. We had a grain farm with about 1,000 acres of grain. and a feed mill on the yard, and we would mill the feed for our pigs, and we had a couple thousand pigs at a time, which has I was the only farm kid in med school, so my farming background has become more unique as time goes on, especially now that the family-owned pig farms are becoming more and more rare. So, and I will, as the presentation goes on, I will kind of share with you my journey across the country. This is my family now. I'm married to Nadia Salvatierra. She's also a family doc. And I have 3 kids. They're Jacob on the far left, Eliana in the middle, and Simon on the right of this picture. They're 8, 10, and 12. And when we talk about purpose and why we do things in life, it's often the people around us and the people that mean the most to us that help us make those decisions and motivate us in some of the decisions that we make. So it's always kind of fun to share some pictures. I have a couple questions to ask of you because I don't actually see any of you on my screen. It's nice to meet you here today, but there's a couple polls just to give me a sense of which province you're attending from, and then I have one other question. And I understand that there's a bit of a delay, so I'm just supposed to keep on talking.
Yeah, Mark, I have launched the poll, and students, you'll see in the bottom left hand of your screen a small tab that comes up to click to access the poll. But I see some of the results coming in. I hope you do too, Mark.
Great, thanks. One of the things I just finished in my life is a Master's of Health Science Education, and I graduate next week. Is my graduation. To get to cross the stage. And from an educational standpoint, one of the most important elements in any setting is to understand the crowd that you're speaking to. So this is very minimal.
Now, are you seeing the results, Mark? If you click polls on the top right.
I see that. I see the polls, but I don't see the.
We've got 57% from BC, 32% from Alberta, 8% from Yukon, someone from Northwest Territories. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Great. Most from BC. All right. Well, I've adventured, and I'll share with you in a bit, my adventures through all those jurisdictions. So thanks. You can launch the next one there.
Successfully launched. May take a minute for it to reach them.
Yeah, great. Well, if you look at the question, it's kind of from an educational standpoint too, it's a poorly designed question because the responses aren't all the same length. So I've kind of given away a bit of the point there. I'll click into it and see. That's good. I'll just carry on with my slides here and watch as the responses come in.
Terrific.
So as I mentioned earlier, my journey kind of started where the big pink arrow starts. States in Lacombe, just west of Lacombe was where my farm was, and where my family continues to be. My brother has bees there now. He lives on the home quarter. And then I moved after high school. I moved to Edmonton, and I completed a 4-year degree in environmental sciences in Edmonton. And at that point, still didn't quite know what I was going to do with my career. Excuse me. I'm missing a slide. Sorry about that delay there. I'm missing in the slide that points the arrow to Calgary. Following my undergrad degree in environmental sciences in Edmonton, I went to Calgary and studied nursing there for a year, and then transitioned out of nursing into medical school. I completed my medical training in Calgary, and then went to Chilliwack, BC for my residency. I kind of followed my some family members out towards BC, did that residency, and then moved up to Iqaluit, and where I met my wife, Nadia. She was also a physician there, and Nadia was from Toronto. And we, after we got married, we moved to Rankin Inlet. And Rankin Inlet I didn't put Nunavut on the survey. The person from Northwest Territories may have been from one of the territories there. And Rankin Inlet, that long squiggly inlet on the map there, is Rankin Inlet. And that's a small town of about 2,000 people on the west coast of Hudson Bay. And Baker Lake is the coldest place in the country. So we had lots of long, dark winters, cold days, and plenty of times where the clinic in town would be canceled if there was a polar bear wandered through town, or if there was so much snow that you couldn't see across the street, they would cancel the clinic. Well, we'll go back a minute. My wife and I stayed in the north because we met in the north and felt a kind of a bit of a sense of purpose to address the needs of the people in the north in those communities, because access to healthcare was low up there. And so I had always kind of wanted to do a bit of surgery, and we looked across the north, and the places to do surgery in the north are Iqaluit on Baffin Island, and then Yellowknife and Inuvik. So while we were living in Rankin, we kind of decided to go to Inuvik, but I needed some surgical training first. So we moved to Vancouver again, where I went through another year of training to learn how to do basic surgery, like C-sections and hernia surgery, a bit of trauma stuff, to be the first call in an emergency situation. And then we moved up to Inuvik. The Inuvik is another town of about 2,800 people, and with 7 outlying communities that are fly-in, except for Fort McPherson and Sigachik, which you could drive to down the road. And Inuvik is where we spent about 10 years of our practice. Inuvik is on the east side of the Mackenzie Delta, which is a huge area flattened out where the Mackenzie River empties into the Arctic Ocean. And one of its claim to fame is that it has the second most dense population of mosquitoes in the world, only second to the Amazon. We frequently would have travelers who thought they were going to tent their way up the Dempster Highway, which is 800 kilometers of gravel between Dawson and Inuvik. And they would be in their tents in July, partways up the Dempster Highway, and then be so overwhelmed by the mosquitoes that they would pack everything up at 2 a.m. and come find a hotel or something in Inuvik. There certainly are a lot of mosquitoes on the Delta. This is a picture of Inuvik, and in the forefront is the hospital. I don't know if you can see my cursor on the screen, but the blue building here is the hospital, and the house that we lived in is over here. If you could see my cursor, just up to the top left of the hospital, the red roof building is the house that we stayed in. The kids' school was this gray building over here, right in the middle of the screen, the large one. And the daycare is the red and green one in the middle. Everything was within a 2-minute walk. That's one of the lovely things about being in a small town. It's that everything is very close by. So this was our home for nearly a decade in the north. There's a few other pictures. When we signed onto Inuvik, we hit the news because there was only one doctor in town before we got there, and 5 of us signed contracts in one day. I'm on the far left there, and my wife is in the middle. And when we signed, we have also had 2 friends from BC that were also a physician couple that also had operating room skills. My wife did her training in anesthesia, so we could do some surgeries together. And the other 2 docs. And the town went from 1 doc to 6 doctors in one day, because there was another doc in town that was so excited by the 4 of us signing on that that she signed on to. So 5 dogs signed up in one day, and that made the news that day. And you can see the heading says it went from 1 doctor to 11 in 6 years, and I'll talk a bit about that. One of the Inuvik counselors said it's a lot easier to get a doctor now than it was 10 years ago. So the idea that our purpose for being there was immediately noticed by the people that lived there. If I look back to the poll, there is purpose that most people said servant behavior. That's kind of the where I was getting at with my presentation, that the purpose comes from how we impact those around us. But certainly there's purpose in, not everybody's pursuing the same purpose. So we had an immediate feedback when we landed in Inuvik and signed on that our professional choice to work in the north was making a big difference to the folks in the town. And just to give you a flavor of what it was like to live in Inuvik and raise kids there, this was their preschool day trip. That it was, I think, minus 25 this day. And the preschool kids were going dog sledding. So that's my daughter in the front of this dog sled, right tucked in there. And we didn't go along with them. So we packaged her up into this dog sled, and away they went for, I was at least an hour running through the bush behind the dogs. And they just had a great time. One of the kids in one of the other sleds was crying at the end when we came to pick them up. But that's certainly a kind of an experience that the kids wouldn't have got in Edmonton. This is the July 1st parade in Inuvik. There's a fire truck and an ambulance, and that's about the parade that you're going to expect there. And sometimes this greenhouse in Inuvik hits the news because it's an old arena that they replaced the ceiling with glass and made a whole bunch of these gardens. And so people could plant, there's a whole bunch of plots there, and various people from town get a plot as long as you promise to weed it, which not everybody kept up with. But the plants grew like crazy because there would be 24 hours of light. And so you could have lettuce in about 12 days in the summertime. And you can go and play on the ice road. So this is my wife and kids running around on the ice road between Inuvik and Tuck, which was a great time. They have since closed this ice road because they finished the road. The gravel road goes all the way up to Tuck now. You can drive on the ITH Inuvik Tuck Highway, so they don't need this ice road. There is still an ice road that goes to the west across the delta, but it's not quite the same. And a couple more pictures. This is my son walking out onto the delta, or the mountains, the Richardson Mountains, until we looked the other way and saw the bear. So we quickly called it back to the van and kept on driving. Now I'm gonna take a few minutes and tell a little story about a patient. Of course, for patients, we always protect identities, so there's no names and locations. But the point of this story is to kind of demonstrate the impact of health professionals in the north. So there's stories about a 5-year-old child who was in one of the remote communities that you can't drive to. There's fly in, fly out communities in the north. And it was wintertime. This child was walking down the sidewalk, along the side of the road. And there's another community dog in town and came up sauntering beside the child. The child slipped on ice or a rock or something and tumbled, and the dog reacted to the sudden movement and nipped at the child's face, doing some damage, got some bite injury to the face. And the child had lots of siblings, several siblings, and had to be medevaced to Inuvik with his mom. And anytime we see injuries like this, you always have to make a decision in a small northern community. Is this the right place to provide treatment, Should they be further flown south? And do I have enough support around me? Is nursing and anesthesia, are they comfortable supporting the needs of this patient? So together with the team, we decided that it would be reasonable to provide care for this young boy there. So we brought him to the operating room and stitched him all up, and was able to keep him in the north through this injury and recovery. We kept him around for a couple of weeks, made sure everything healed up properly, and then sent him back home. And for the years after that, every time this mom and child were in town, they made a point of coming by the clinic and office and looking for me and showing me how the wounds were healed, and expressing gratitude that care was able to be delivered in the north, because to leave the rest of the family in another community and go all the way to Edmonton, usually, because for plastic surgery, that usually means going down to Edmonton. That's a significant travel obligation. It takes days and leaves the rest of the family behind. So it was always a constant reminder to me when I saw this child and his mom about the value of providing services close to home, close to people's home as possible, and the significant difference that makes to people to have care in close to their home. So I'm just reminding you where we were at. That was Inuvik up there. And we stayed there for just about 10 years. And then my wife's career took some developments, and she wanted to get more into leadership, health delivery and authority leadership. And so the Alberta and the Edmonton area offered a larger kind of health leadership potential. So we moved the family down to Edmonton, where we live now. And this is my team that I work with now. So when I got to Edmonton, there was a job posted for the director of the Office of Rural and Regional Health. And because it had rural in the title and regional, I thought, well, I know stuff about rural. This sounds like a job I can do. And so what we do now as a team is we distribute medical education around the province. And we make sure that when medical students and residents, by the end of their education, haven't just done all their training in Edmonton, that we push the education around through the 45 different towns across the province. And of course, I couldn't do that all by myself. So in the picture are coordinators and administrators who plan the rotations for students and residents across the province, and who work in various places in the medical school, some doing research, some helping with policy development, and people managing. This is a recent presentation I gave called Alberta as Classroom, because the point of my job now at the university is to help the medical school understand that education doesn't just happen in the classroom in downtown Edmonton, but that learning how to be a doctor, and my lens is through a doctor, but certainly this idea is applicable to nurses, to dental hygienists, dentists, physiotherapists, any profession that's providing primary health care or health services to patients can be included in this. That when you are educated across the province, then you're more likely to model your career according to what you saw as a student. Documents like this, The Future of Medical Education in Canada, provide inspiration to me as we think about how can we change things so that the current state of gradually reducing access to healthcare across Canada can be reversed and changed. At the root of why I do this is because of this belief that the learning that we do is actually shaped by the context in which it occurs. That if one learns to be a doctor in Inuvik, or one learns to be a dental hygienist in Yellowknife, that you actually become a different kind of those professionals that's more willing to work in those same settings. So in your own lives, as you consider what you're going to do with your careers and the decisions you make, when you think about where you're going to do that training, that will also impact what you do with your careers. Here's a picture of the province. You can see the green stars are traditionally where we think of education happening at the university or at Maine College or Polytechnic in Grand Prairie. And many of you in this call today might be from one of those smaller places that's represented by a little golden star. And so I'm constantly trying to work at the medical school to make sure that as much medical education happens in the communities represented by the little gold stars. So as you kind of listen to this, hopefully you could have been able to see that coming from a small rural background certainly does not preclude you from kind of career development and pursuing any kind of career that you would like, and that as you do so, considering the impact of those decisions on the people around you can help you in finding that purpose. That's a bit of a map of all the arrows representing my journeys across the country. I certainly feel like I have a broad understanding of what life can look like in various places in this country, and the raising a family in those different settings was a very interesting journey. And that along that journey, what I've discovered is that my greatest sense of purpose, or the purpose that I get, is really a gift from those around me from whom I make a difference. And I shared that one story about the young child in Inuvik, but it was frequently the case where patients would express a lot of gratitude over being able to receive care in the north and not having to travel. It was a 8-hour plane ride on a single engine prop plane to get from Inuvik to Yellowknife in the best of weather. If the weather was down, sometimes people would wait for a day for the weather to clear and then have to travel for emergency care, leaving their families often behind them. So we certainly had a frequent immediate feedback from patients in the north that being able to have a safe and competent healthcare team in Inuvik made a big difference for them. I reached out to the various jurisdictions to say, what kind of career opportunity catalogs do you have for high school students who are thinking about going to the north? And it's actually, the territories has a nice guide of all the health occupations that you could do. So this is an easy one to search up if you're thinking about working in the north. The Yukon has something similar, and certainly in Alberta, doesn't matter where you go, if you had a medical training or nursing training or dental training, you could basically go to any small town that you wanted to and set up a practice. Because what's happening now is training is frequently getting more urbanized, and so the graduates model their careers after what they see in their training. So the graduates are becoming less and less likely to go into rural settings. So as you make your career decisions, consider or explore these opportunities for careers in rural settings. You can see at the very bottom of this, in the quote there, where it says, was concerted recruiting, particularly of visiting medical learners. And that's part of my motivation then for coming back to the medical school is the recruiting that we did to go from that one doctor to 11 doctors in Inuvik over those years was at my supper table. So every time we had a learner in Inuvik, we would always invite them for dinner or to social events and share with them what it was like to work in the north and invite them to return back. So over the 8.5 years that we lived there, we recruited an additional doctor every year from the learners that came through there. So when we left, there was 11 docks in town, and that was through the recruiting of learners. This was a picture I took on the delta of the caribou running from the delta over to or from the land over to the delta before the winter. They run them onto the delta to keep them safe from the wolves when the water is frozen. So I'm just right at the end of my half an hour there, and I see Lisa turned her camera back on. I really appreciate the time, Lisa, to talk about my journey across the Canada and why it was that I made those decisions. So thanks so much again for the opportunity to be here today.
Thank you.